The day I knew everything would come unglued, the intern in finance asked me where to buy a badge lanyard. I didn't answer, I just stared at the hollow space where her government clearance ID should have been. That tiny rectangle of plastic, laminated and coated, was the only thing between our office and a six-figure federal violation. And she was carrying it around like a Claire's accessory. But no one cared, because no one knew, except me. I'd spent the last 8 years as the company's authorized security liaison, a title so dry it made your eyes itch just hearing it. I didn't give speeches. I didn't pose for the company newsletter with fake laugh smiles. I processed clearance renewals. I tracked security protocols. I sat in on audits and made sure the Pentagon never had a reason to send us one of their polite emails, the ones that read like friendly notes but carried the weight of a shutdown. You don't mess with those, you don't lose track of those. You especially don't hand their job off to someone who thinks a polygraph is a fancy home speaker. But that's not what we celebrate anymore, is it? 3 months ago, the CEO's daughter got married to a man named Chad. I wish I were making that up. Chad. He looked like someone had microwaved an old fraternity composite and added hair gel. He was suddenly director of HR strategy, a title no one had heard of until he printed it on business cards with gold trim. He walked around with a clipboard and this permanent smirk like he was running a real-life episode of The Office, and we were all just side characters waiting to be optimized. That day, I was finishing my quarterly report, the clearance log, updated contractor files, audit trail verifications, the whole shebang. Signed, sealed, timestamped. Dropped it into the encrypted federal portal like I'd done 29 times before. I felt good. Secure. Things were in order. Then I passed Chad in the hallway. He was leaning against the break room door like he owned time itself, chewing on a protein bar and watching the new intern struggle with the security badge printer like it was a foreign artifact. She laughed nervously, said, "It keeps jamming." Chad winked and said, "We'll just hire someone who knows how to fix it. Streamline the dead weight." Then he glanced at me and smiled like I was already gone. "Now, listen. If this is the kind of story you're into, real office betrayals, quiet women with sharp claws, and HR clowns who don't realize they're walking into federal landmines, do me a favor, hit the like button and subscribe. It sounds silly, I know, but 90% of you don't, and it helps the team more than you'd believe. Keeps us stocked with caffeine and emotional damage control. Okay, back to it. I filed out of that hallway and into my office, closed the door, locked it. Sat down and did what I always do, double-checked the federal regs, submitted the final handover notes to the system archive, and updated my personal documentation. My office had a faint hum, the air purifier doing its thing, the LED strip on my monitor blinking gently in approval. No applause. No gold stars, just systems working like they should. And still, something in my chest shifted. Chad was trouble, not the kind that shows up loud and messy. The quiet kind, the kind that starts with a laugh in the break room and ends with a federal investigation. I'd seen it before, contractors who cut corners, startups who didn't file the right forms, guy in procurement who thought he could ghost a background check until a missing clearance froze a whole weapons shipment in Kansas. I knew the signs, and Chad, he was a walking red flag with a clipboard, but I wasn't worried because I had documentation. I had records. I had a name that was tied to every single clearance our company held. That wasn't ego, that was structure. My name, Judith Ellen Moore, was listed on our government filings, our federal liaison ledger, our active facility clearances, and our cybersecurity thresholds. I was the key in the lock, the only one, and I knew where I kept the spare. I lost access to the background check dashboard on a Thursday morning. No warning, no scheduled maintenance pop-up. Just a spinning wheel and a login rejection that said I lacked sufficient clearance. My clearance, that I'd managed for 8 years. I tried it again and again. Same result. I even checked the admin portal, locked. No audit log, no override. Just a silent digital door slammed in my face. Now, when your job is keeping track of who can legally walk into a room with government-grade hardware and who can't, a locked system isn't a glitch. It's a message, a very deliberate one. I walked down to IT. The kid manning the desk was eating a granola bar like it was a time-release sedative. I asked if there had been any access reassignments. He blinked at me and said, "Oh yeah, HR submitted a permissions update yesterday. Said you'd been transitioned." Transitioned? I didn't even bother asking what that meant. I just nodded, turned around, and walked toward the elevators. The building smelled like burned coffee and half-cooked ambition, standard for Thursdays. Back at my desk, the air was too still. Even the old HVAC unit, which usually clicked like it was counting down to detonation, had gone silent. My inbox was calm, too calm. No alerts. No audit pings. Not even a morning calendar sync. That's when my phone rang. "Judith? Yeah, hey, Chad here," as if I didn't know the voice. That smugness clung to the walls like Axe body spray. "Could you swing by HR for a sec? Just a quick chat." I stood up, smoothed my blazer, and walked down the hallway like I was heading into battle. It wasn't fear, it was resignation. Like watching a tornado roll across a field, knowing your scarecrow's gonna lose the fight. But you stand there anyway out of principle. Chad was waiting with a half-empty La Croix and a printed packet he hadn't read. He gestured to the seat across from his desk like he was about to offer me a scented candle and a severance plan. Judith, he said, glancing at the paper like it was doing the talking, after reviewing the organizational float chart, we noticed some. Let's call them misaligned priorities in your department. I blinked. You mean security compliance? He smiled, that patronizing grin that makes you want to file a hostile environment complaint just for existing in the same zip code. Well, yeah, but we're shifting toward a flatter model. Less red tape, more agility. I said nothing. This isn't personal, he added, which always means it absolutely is. You've done great work. Just times are changing. We're cutting some redundancies. And unfortunately, that includes the security liaison role, the one required by federal statute. He didn't answer. Just slid a standard exit folder across the desk with a sticky note that said thank you, in glitter gel pen. I think it was Brooke's handwriting. I picked it up, flipped it shut, reached into my purse, pulled out my ID badge, and set it down gently like it was a loaded weapon. Then I looked him dead in the eye and said, "You'll want to notify federal services within 24 hours. He raised an eyebrow, confused. Huh. I leaned in just slightly, just enough for my voice to drop below casual. You won't. Then I stood up, walked out, didn't even say goodbye to the front desk. Back in my car, I sat in the driver's seat for a full minute, letting the weight settle. Not sadness, not panic, something else. Cold fury, dressed in wool slacks and sensible flats. I opened my work laptop one last time, offline, secured, but still mine for the next 90 minutes. I typed up a final liaison log, flagged the terminated badge ID, noted the chain of custody for encrypted systems, and updated the federal contact list with one line: Judith Ellen Moore role terminated. Then I opened the encrypted email portal, attached the file, CC'd the Department of Defense Compliance liaison, and hit send. No drama, no scorched earth goodbye, just facts. Logged, time-stamped, undeniable. By the time Chad even realized what he'd done, I'd be a ghost in the system. And he'd be staring down the kind of silence that only federal agencies know how to weaponize. Brooke, who once asked me if DoD was the name of a new software platform, was now listed as the acting liaison on our internal directory. I saw it while scrolling through the company's freshly redesigned org chart, which Chad had posted on LinkedIn with the caption, "Trimming the fat, flattening the curve, future-proofing." He'd also attached a picture of himself standing in front of a whiteboard with arrows going in 7 directions and the word synergy circled 3 times. Brooke's new role officially was Security Compliance Specialist, provisional. Unofficially, she was a 22-year-old intern with a minor in marketing and a Canva addiction. Her job before this? Summer lifeguard. No clearance, no federal training, just a spreadsheet of names she color-coded by zodiac sign. I know this because she posted a TikTok about it. The caption said, "When her new job lets you touch gov files, zany laptoplocked #girlboss #clearancequeen." I watched it twice. Once to confirm it was real, once more to screenshot the open document behind her. It was a subcontractor onboarding form, with the SSNs clearly visible. I didn't laugh. Not then. Instead, I opened up the federal contract bulletin and searched our company's ID. I still had read-only access through a public portal. The most recent activity showed a pending award review for a joint task order, one with a 48-hour submission deadline. That meant time-sensitive documents. That meant signatures. That meant someone, Brooke, was supposed to file a clearance at a station, verifying that all personnel on the task were vetted, approved, logged under federal oversight. Except she didn't, because she didn't know how, because Chad didn't tell her, because Chad didn't know. Instead, he was bragging during a fireside chat on the company's intranet about how much money they were saving by cutting the bureaucratic bloat. He used phrases like legacy inefficiencies and agile compliance, like he was pitching a startup and not describing a federal contractor who, by law, needed someone like me just to exist. It already missed 2 procedural check-ins. The encrypted drive used for background report storage was expiring. Auto-locking. The renewal forms, still in my inbox when they shut me out. And the clearance at a station for the subcontractor, an aerospace firm out of Nevada working on drone guidance firmware, was due in 36 hours. The form needed a signature from an active, registered liaison. They didn't have one. Brooke, from what I could tell, just highlighted the line, left a heart emoji in the margin, and forwarded it to legal. Legal didn't notice, but the contractor did. They flagged the document as incomplete and escalated it. Not to Chad, he'd instructed them to send all forms to his new streamlined workflow inbox, which no one was actually monitoring, but to the federal subcontracting officer attached to the deal. That officer, in turn, quietly pinged the compliance team, and somewhere in a quiet cubicle in Washington, D.C., a red flag appeared next to our company's name. Not a siren, not yet, but a record. I knew how this played out. The wheels would turn slowly at first, but once they started, they didn't stop. Back in my own world, smaller, quieter, better lit, I sipped tea and scrolled through updates. My inbox, once bursting with access logs and audit schedules, now held messages from 3 other firms. People who'd heard I was transitioned and wanted to grab coffee or chat about opportunities. I wasn't biting. Not yet, I was still watching. Not for vengeance, not even for closure, just to see the moment when silence turned to panic. When someone would realize they were holding a file with no name, no signature, and no legal standing. And the only woman who could have fixed it, already gone. The pre-review checklist came from a faceless Gov address buried in the alphabet soup of federal oversight. It was standard, a nudge before the quarterly inspection. The kind of thing you only ignored if you wanted your next budget frozen like a middle school lunch tray. The email subject was plain, pre-review materials, confirmation required. But buried 3 clicks deep, on page 7 of the attached PDF, was a red box. Missing, signature of authorized security liaison file 13 BD subcontractor onboarding. That box was more than a red flag. It was a flare gun aimed at your own foot. I wasn't supposed to see the document. But someone from the old contracts team, someone who hadn't been fully looped in on Chad's purge, forwarded it to my personal address. Just the subject line and one line in the body. Thought you should see this. It's happening. I opened the file and stared at the box. The space where my name used to go. The empty field that carried more weight than Chad's entire resume. And they'd submitted it blank. Well, almost, because a day later they tried to fix it. Chad, in his infinite wisdom, dug through the company's old digital archive and found one of my previous signatures on a training document, back when we still used DocuSign. He took that image, dropped it into the subcontractor file, and backdated the approval. He didn't encrypt the file. He didn't update the metadata. He didn't even flatten the image properly. Any half-trained compliance officer could tell it had been dragged in like a sticker. It was the kind of forgery that wouldn't fool a teenager trying to skip gym class. Brooke, bless her heart, sent the revised file back to the review contact with a smiley face in the email footer and the subject. Updated. Hope this helps smiling face with smiling eyes. I didn't need to intervene. Because the government didn't care about smiley faces. They cared about logs, they cared about badge IDs, they cared about protocols that couldn't be photoshopped back into place. Meanwhile, my phone buzzed again. Another message. Different sender this time, CTO of a rival defense contracting firm headquartered 2 states over. The message was short. We've been watching the filings. Your former company's in freefall. Any interest in coming aboard? I didn't respond immediately. Just saved it to a folder labeled options and closed the screen. Then I opened my encrypted portal, still active for another 11 days thanks to my federal termination protocol, and logged my final liaison termination confirmation. I attached 3 documents: proof of badge surrender, timestamped, notification that no new liaison had been appointed to replace me, per public directory records. Screenshot of the company's internal org chart showing security liaison Brooke, provisional, with no clearance ID attached. Then I submitted the confirmation to the agency contact I'd worked with for years, Marla. A woman who wore orthopedic flats and spoke in dry compliance jargon so thick it could stop a tank. An hour later, Marla responded. Acknowledged. No record of authorized replacement. Will flag, that was it. No exclamation marks, no emoji, just will flag, which in government speak meant, this train is about to get inspected and we're not slowing down. Somewhere in the bowels of the compliance review chain, a file folder had just sprouted a bright yellow sticky note that said missing. And the man who forged a signature didn't even know his digital fingerprints were already logged. I sat back, watching the cracks grow. They weren't explosions, not yet, but they were widening. And Chad, clipboard king of budget cuts and protein shakes, was standing right on the fault line. The formal reminder arrived on a Tuesday, slipped between a spam email from a wellness vendor and a team-building invite for axe throwing. It wasn't loud. No flashing lights. Just a plain text memo stamped from the Department of Defense Compliance Unit. 6 sentences, 5 of them bone dry. But the last one, failure to maintain a designated and federally approved authorized security liaison may result in immediate review suspension and risk debarment. That sentence should have caused a fire drill. Instead, Chad printed it, highlighted the word may, and tossed it onto the corner of his standing desk like it was junk mail from ARP. He called a quick alignment huddle with Legal and Brooke, told them not to overreact to government theater. I know the playbook, he smirked, facing the glass-walled conference room. They always send one of these before a quarterly. It's posture. Bluster. They bluff, we bluff back. Brooke nodded too fast, scribbling on her iPad with a Hello Kitty stylus. Legal looked like they wanted to melt into the floor. Then Chad, in his infinite crisis management genius, handed Brooke the official compliance documentation binder, the one she'd once mistaken for printer calibration manual, and said, fill out the response forms, reaffirm our protocols, copy something from last year if you need to. Let me repeat that. He told an intern with 0 clearance, no federal training, and a communications degree from a school I'd never heard of to plagiarize national security documentation, and she did. I watched it happen in real time from a distance. Public filings, version histories, metadata timestamps. All of it painted a slow, exquisite picture of a man in a suit walking off a cliff while telling everyone he'd read the map upside down on purpose. Meanwhile, the CEO, Howard Blakely Roman III, master of delegation and grilled salmon Fridays, was busy preparing for a major federal pitch. A weapons tracking contract worth somewhere north of $200 million. His days were a blur of slide decks, mock presentations, and overpriced espresso deliveries from the lobby cafe. He hadn't read a compliance memo since the Bush administration. Chad told him everything was under control. Howard nodded and went back to practicing his pitch voice in the mirror. No one told him the documents they were relying on were now officially tainted, that the subcontractor onboarding form had been flagged a second time, this time by the DoD audit software, which caught the mismatched digital signature against federal archives. The system didn't alert the company directly. It alerted the liaison on file, which technically was still me, so I received a ping, not a full alert, just a low-level audit flag tagged to my profile. I didn't respond, of course. That would have violated termination protocol, but I watched the notification float past, and I waited, because now the system was awake. The wheels were turning. Chad had built his entire reorg on the fantasy that no one reads the fine print, that the government doesn't notice missing names or mismatched logins, that oversight is theater and structure is optional. But the government doesn't forget, it archives. And while Chad was bragging to Brooke about streamlining our legacy hierarchy, somewhere in a secure data center in Virginia, a flag was raised. A timestamp logged. A missing credential noted. They didn't need to make noise. They didn't have to send agents. All they had to do was wait, just like I was. Audit week hit like a snowstorm no one believed in until it was halfway through the lobby. The Department of Defense sent over their liaison name 5 days in advance. H. Ramos, notoriously no-nonsense, known in the contractor world as the Reaper. Not because he yelled. He never raised his voice. He just showed up, asked his questions, and quietly killed careers with a clipboard. Howard, the CEO, caught wind of Ramos's assignment and spun into high-performance mode. Suits pressed, speech rehearsed. He even had catering brought in for the review, lobster bisque and beet sliders, because nothing says we're not panicking like artisanal soup in glass ramekins. Behind the scenes, though, things were fraying at the seams. It started with badge issuance. The security printer wouldn't load. Not because of a jam, because no one had renewed the biometric sync license. That used to be my job. Renew it every 90 days through the secure portal, verified through dual authentication with my government badge, and a private key I kept locked in a desk drawer. No one had touched the portal since I left. The license expired. The printer stalled. So Brooke, in a stroke of pure toddler genius, printed audit visitor badges using the company's marketing template, complete with Comic Sans and a watermark that said "Welcome to the team." Next came the access logs. The audit required a 30-day history of secure facility entry. Chad had assumed this would be automated. It wasn't. The access management software dumped raw logs into a server I used to sort through daily, flagging anomalies, reconciling clearance levels, updating expirations. Brooke didn't know how to log in. The logs were blank. Actually blank, as in 0 entries. Chad told IT to just fabricate something that looks realistic. IT refused. Then mid-Tuesday, the encrypted drive vault used to store federal background reports pinged a fatal error. It hadn't been rekeyed. The software had auto-locked due to a lapsed compliance token. Everything inside was sealed shut: contractor files, polygraph results, facility schematics, foreign national screenings. 3 years of data. Frozen. Chad told legal to try restarting it. Legal went silent, and all the while, I was sitting in a corner booth of a cafe 2 blocks away, sipping a flat white, watching the theater unfold through public filing trackers and internal rumor leaks. The temp receptionist, a friend from years ago, texted me a photo of the visitor badges with 4 crying laugh emojis and the words, "Is this a prank?" It wasn't. It was what happens when a company builds a castle out of cardboard and then fires the only person who remembered to order the fire extinguisher. I hadn't sabotaged a single thing. I hadn't planted a virus or whispered in anyone's ear. I hadn't touched a file, corrupted a drive, or sent a single anonymous tip. I just left, took my keys, logged my final report, shut the door, and let time do what time always does to arrogance: expose it. Because every system I'd maintained wasn't just protocol, it was prevention. It was protection against exactly this, against self-important men with clipboards who think compliance is a buzzword and not a shield. And now, the cracks weren't just showing, they were singing. At exactly 9:43 a.m., the conference room doors opened, and Hector Ramos, Department of Defense Compliance Liaison, destroyer of false confidence, stepped inside, flanked by 2 auditors with tablet cases and 0 facial expressions. The air changed like someone turned off the oxygen. Could almost hear the faint whimper of Chad's last brain cell trying to Google how to bluff a federal agent. The slideshow was already up, over-designed, obnoxiously animated, and filled with words like agile integration and paradigm shift. The title screen literally said "Security Evolved Trademark." I couldn't see it, of course, but someone in legal leaked the deck to me after hours, said it gave them a nosebleed just trying to format the fonts. Howard, the CEO, beamed like a kid about to show off his science fair volcano. Mr. Ramos, thank you so much for joining us. We're eager to walk you through our enhanced security model. We've made exciting strides in reducing internal redundancy while boosting overall efficiency. Ramos didn't blink, just sat down, pulled out a checklist, and said, "Before we begin, I'd like to speak with your current authorized security liaison." Pause. Confusion. Everyone looked at Chad. Brooke, seated off to the side with her iPad and her third energy drink of the morning, fumbled. Well, technically, Chad jumped in. Too fast, we cut that role, totally inefficient. We've streamlined the function across multiple departments. You could have heard a moth land on the snack tray. Ramos slowly looked up, not surprised, not angry, just noting, like a surgeon reading an x-ray of a patient who swears they feel fine while their ribcage is missing. He clicked his pen, made a single note. Then he said, "Excuse me a moment," and stepped out of the room. He didn't slam the door. He didn't glare. He just walked out with the quiet finality of someone about to initiate an event horizon. Inside the room, panic began to flicker like a loose light bulb. Howard leaned toward Chad, whispering something urgent. Brooke looked like she was trying to become one with her chair. Legal flipped through a binder so fast pages ripped. 2 blocks away, I got an email from Marla, the same government contact I'd filed my final report with weeks ago. Subject, Clearance termination confirmation. Judith, this is to confirm receipt of your previously submitted liaison termination notification, badge surrender form, and supporting documentation. As no replacement has been designated on record, our records remain updated per your submission. If contacted, we will reference this chain. Thank you for your continued diligence and protocol adherence. CC'd on the email, H. Ramos. I didn't smile, not exactly. But the corner of my mouth did twitch as I stirred my coffee, because now it was real. It wasn't just cracks anymore. It wasn't just missed renewals or toddler-level forgeries. It was procedural confirmation that the entire foundation had collapsed, and the very man who dismissed me with a smirk had just told a federal officer that the most legally required role in our entire security framework was inefficient. The worst part? He believed it. Chad truly thought cutting my position made him look decisive, bold, disruptive. But the only thing he disrupted was $200 million worth of federal confidence. And the call Ramos was making? That wasn't just a courtesy. That was the opening move. When Ramos returned, he wasn't holding a clipboard anymore, just a single sheet of paper. The air inside the conference room had gone still, like someone had vacuum-sealed the entire floor. Even the digital slideshow had frozen mid-transition, some glitchy PowerPoint animation stuck halfway between compliance strategy and streamlined solutions. Appropriate. Ramos stepped to the head of the table, set the paper down face up, and straightened the sleeves of his government tissue suit jacket like he was adjusting the tension of a noose. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. As of this morning, he said, the Department of Defense will be suspending all active and pending federal contract activity, with your organization pending further investigation into protocol violations. Dead silence. Howard, the CEO, blinked twice. "I'm sorry, what?" "You were required by law," Ramos continued, his tone flat as stone, "to notify the relevant federal departments of the termination or reassignment of any authorized security liaison within 72 hours. Your last notification on record is dated 6 weeks ago." Chad looked like a balloon that had just realized it was hovering over a bonfire. We didn't know it had to be submitted formally," he stammered. "I mean, we assumed that." Ramos held up the piece of paper like a priest reading a list of sins. "No emotion, just facts. She did notify us." He turned it around so everyone could see. "My name, my timestamp, my encryption signature. Clear as daylight, Judith Ellen Moore. Liaison termination confirmation. Received, logged, and acknowledged." "She followed protocol," Ramos said. Then he let the pause hang, heavy and surgical. "You did not." Howard's jaw moved, but no words came out. His skin had gone the color of wet chalk. He looked at Chad the way a captain might look at a drunken sailor who just lit a cigar next to the gunpowder barrel. Chad opened his mouth again, something pathetic forming at the edge of his voice. Another deflection, probably about systems migration or interdepartmental overlap, but Ramos wasn't listening. He placed the paper back down, tapped it once, and said, "Our formal report will be filed within the hour. Until further notice, all government-facing operations are frozen. Access to secure platforms will be revoked. Facility clearance suspended. Contractor engagements paused." Brooke made a small choking sound. Her iPad clattered to the table like it was trying to escape her. Legal didn't move. One guy literally closed his laptop and folded his hands like he was praying. And Howard just sat back in his chair, exhaling a breath he probably didn't realize he'd been holding since Ramos walked in. "You said it was streamlined," he whispered to Chad. "You told me we were covered." "I thought," Chad began. But Howard cut him off with a single gesture. The kind of motion that ends conversations, careers, marriages, maybe even bloodlines. There was no anger in it, just fatigue. A man realizing that one nepotistic hire had detonated the structure of everything he'd built over 2 decades. Across town, I refreshed my inbox. Marla had sent a second note. Status officially changed. Suspension under review per Clause 14. You will not be contacted further unless testimony is requested. We appreciate your compliance history. Clause 14. The one no one ever wants to hear. The one tied to debarment, blacklisting, and loss of eligibility for federal work across all related sectors. The kind of clause that makes shareholders sweat and boards start drafting early retirement packages. I stared at the message, then slowly set my phone down beside my tea. I hadn't screamed. I hadn't hacked a server. I hadn't marched into that glass palace demanding revenge. All I'd done was my job, and when they tossed me out like a paperclip, I let the absence do the rest. At 7:12 the next morning, federal access was revoked. Not paused, not under review, revoked. Security keypads at every branch facility blinked red. Every terminal linked to secure servers locked mid-keystroke. The encrypted storage arrays went dark. Contractors were locked out of job sites. Badge readers failed. Emails bounced. Even the backup comm server, a dinosaur I'd personally rebuilt during a malware scare in 2019, scrubbed from the network. It wasn't a shutdown. It was an execution. By 9 a.m., the board was gathered in the top floor conference room. No coffee, no breakfast spread, just stunned silence and printed copies of a federal suspension notice stamped in bold red ink. The CEO stood at the head of the table, hair mussed, tie loosened, eyes puffy like he hadn't slept. He read the notice out loud once, then again, then dropped it like it burned his hands. What is this? How is this possible? Chad sat slouched 2 chairs down, pale and sweating through his slim-fit shirt. It was just HR, he muttered like he was trying to conjure a better past. I was optimizing. It was just dead weight. Howard turned slowly toward him. Dead weight, he repeated. Quiet, too quiet. Chad nodded, gulping. She wasn't customer-facing. She was back office. Compliance. A bottleneck. All the systems were her, Howard snapped, suddenly lurching forward in his chair. She was the clearance. She was every single point of contact we had. And you cut her? It was an efficiency play, Chad whispered, voice breaking. We needed to reduce it. Looked redundant. Howard's hands started to shake. He pressed them flat on the table, breathing unevenly. You did what? No one answered. There was nothing left to say. Even legal wouldn't look up from their notes. By noon, the investor pool was notified. By 3 p.m., 2 joint ventures had withdrawn. One board member walked out mid-call. Another was seen packing their office by 4:30. Somewhere around sunset, Brooke posted an Instagram story from her car with the caption, well, that was a mess. Face sparkles #unemployed again #not my fault. And across town, in a clean little office with soft lighting and no framed motivational quotes, I sat at a desk uncluttered by chaos. The firm was newer, leaner, sharper, run by grown-ups who actually understood what compliance meant. The offer came 2 weeks after I left the last place, tucked neatly into an encrypted PDF with words like full autonomy, non-interference clause, and liaison authority fully vested. The contract we just secured, $90 million, defense logistics. The exact same scope the other company had lost. The bid had been open less than 6 hours before I attached my credentials and clicked submit. Now it was confirmed, green-lighted. My name already listed on the liaison logs. I opened the final clearance acknowledgement, still active, still respected. I didn't smile, not really, just breathed. A slow, quiet exhale as the last thread of tension left my spine. On my desk sat a single object, the badge from my old job, deactivated, laminated, sealed in a shadow box frame like a fossil from another life. I didn't frame it out of nostalgia. I framed it as a reminder. Sometimes, you don't have to burn the place down. You just have to stop holding the foundation together. Big thanks for watching, you sneaky seniors. Subscribe to keep the coffee pot brewing revenge. Your ex-colleagues won't know what hit 'em.